We're now going to talk about some specific aspects of LegalServer as they pertain to groups who do housing work. So the first thing that I want to highlight here is that, of course, you can incorporate specific information for your housing cases, whether that's based on being part of the housing program or based on some specific problem codes that we select. So you can show some specific information for these cases during things like your intake process, your closing form, and of course, just throughout the life of a case. So we're going to take a peek of that as it refers to our intake process here. So this is a very, very simple example of an intake. And just wanted to show you again a couple of the housing specific options throughout here. So on our initial page of our intake process, I've already filled out some required information like our client name. And then as I scroll down, I get to our address block. And this is an example of a site that has an optional module called the GIS module. And that is going to give us some extra tagging on our address values that we enter. So things like congressional and state legislature district. You can also add additional shape files. So you could, for instance, capture things like borough here in New York City, council district, etc. The address block as it is already has some extra functionality where if I enter a zip code, it's going to default the city and county value for me. That's just the standard address block. But again, with the GIS module, if I enter a full address, it's going to check that address against the USPS database to validate it, make sure it's a valid address. And then again, we'll set some of these for your address value. And again, if you choose to set this up in your site, you would be able to decide what types of things get tagged to your address values. All of this is also reportable. So you'd be able to build and run reports, seeing where your cases are when it comes to your districts, boroughs, things like that as well. And we do also have an optional mapping for the reports. So you can display this information in maps as well. So moving on to our next step in this intake. Once I format my phone number correctly there, we're going to get to our case question step, which is typically the step of the intake where you would select your legal problem code. And as I've mentioned, can have some additional questions or things to fill out based on that problem code selected. So not only could you have some extra questions based on the fact that this is in the housing program, so there might be some general housing related questions that you want to ask for every case in this program. But again, you can also do that specific to a problem code and even a special problem code as well. So if I choose mortgage foreclosure as our problem code, you'll notice I have a couple of extra fields to answer here. And again, if you are utilizing special legal problem code, you could have some connected to those as well. So if there were other questions I needed to ask for a build it back type of foreclosure, again, I could have those appear when I select that value. Also note that you can incorporate branch logic within these values. And when I say branch logic, all I'm talking about is really just this concept we're seeing, where when I choose a certain value to a question, other things happen. So in this case, I choose mortgage foreclosure and I get these three fields. But also just wanted to mention that you could have that logic show up here as well. So for instance, if we chose that it was a landlord-tenant issue, maybe we want to ask if we've been evicted. And if they say yes to that question, then you want to ask the date of eviction, what paperwork you've received, etc. But of course, if they say no, they have not been evicted, you don't want to ask those extra questions. So you can build in that logic here as well, really anywhere throughout the site that you would want to. So that is our case questions. I'm going to go ahead and finish out our intake so you can see one more piece of functionality that we have set up here. So I'm just going to accept our case, set our office and program, set our primary assignment. And of course, I have the option to email my primary assignment to let them know that I've assigned this to them, or anyone else I might want to let know, like my supervisor. And once I continue from here, this is going to bring me to my case profile. And not just any case profile, but if you look here in my breadcrumbs, we are viewing this with a special housing profile. So this is, again, something that you can set up if you have a housing unit and you also have other units that do other type of work. They probably, when they click on their cases in, the consumer law unit or the family unit, probably don't want to see a bunch of housing specific information like we're seeing for this case profile. So that is why you can create additional profile views so they can be case type specific. And as you can see here, you can have them default based on the problem code selected at intake. So LegalServer knew automatically that this was a case that should display with our special housing view because we chose mortgage foreclosure as our problem code. And you could have one housing view for all of the problem codes related to housing, or you could have one for each, or you could have one general one that's just for, special eviction types of cases, or whatever breakdown really that you all would need to do. So just to mention, the profile itself is also completely customizable. So any of the information that you're seeing on here, you would get to control as far as what data appears on the case profile and also just the format of it. So if you, for instance, were to tell us, well, the client's contact information is really important to us. We, call our clients a lot to get more information from them. So being all the way down here on the profile is not ideal. We would be able to move that whole entire tab, all of that information up onto the profile wherever you would want it to be available. So keep that in mind. Your case profiles are all completely customizable. And again, you can create some special views to have based on the type of case that you're looking at. So if you do have some additional profile views like this one, you also get to control the actions menu for those views. So as you can see, our actions menu here has some housing specific options on it. And then also, of course, just our more basic general case options like adding notes and time. So speaking of some of our special housing options, you would be able to build in any custom processes needed here for any data that you need to collect about these cases after the intake stage, but before your closing stage. So any of that data you need to collect, again, you'd be able to build out any of these processes to collect it. What you can also do is utilize some options like I'm going to show you an example of, and this is leveraging the APIs within LegalServer. So if you haven't heard the term API, it's essentially a way that computers talk to each other. So in this instance, what we're using it for is to send the address of our case to a website, which is the Just Fix New York City website. So this is a New York City specific example, but again, of course, could be utilized in other places as well in a similar fashion. But basically what we do is send the address of this case to that website. That website is then going to run with that address and return the information it finds to us here in LegalServer. So that is just kind of the general gist of what an API can do. So it can send information out of LegalServer and return information back in based on those parameters that you've set up. So again, this one is really just an example, but I wanted to show it to you here. So we'll click into our link here. So what it's doing again right now is it's sending the address from our case and returning our results. So I put in a very generic New York City address, 500 Park Avenue. So you'll see it's returning a lot of information. And we can see any open violations, information like that. So again, just an example, obviously, depending on where you are in the world, you might have some websites available like this that, again, we can connect to and just send information back and forth so that we can have this important, helpful information here in your case management system. All right, so the last thing I wanted to make sure to include here today is to talk a bit about the option to utilize what we call bundles in LegalServer, case bundles. And a case bundle is really just a way to bundle cases together, as the name suggests, for a common reason or common purpose. So for housing cases, typically it would be several clients who are having issues in the same building or with the same landlord. So you might want to associate all those cases together, know that they all exist when you're working on them, and also be able to see the notes, activities, documents across those cases really easily. So that's exactly what bundles will do for you. And you can see here right now, I'm looking at the bundle itself. So this one is our Shady Lane apartment bundle. And we have 3 clients who are having issues with this apartment complex. And please ignore the problem codes. I did not clean those up to make them housing related, but here you can see that you can see some basic information about these cases that are related to the bundle. You would also be able to see any notes, events, contacts, or documents that were either directly added to the bundle or to any cases on the bundle. So you'll see here for our case notes, this first note was added directly to the bundle, and then these others were added to each of the cases that are part of this bundle. When we click into one of the cases that is part of our bundle, we'll get our case profile. Again, this one's just an example. This one looks a little bit different than the last one, but still just an example of what you could do here. But now you'll see that I can see, again, all of the associated cases that are in this bundle with this case. And again, when I'm looking at things like activities, notes, documents, I would see all of them for the bundle, and I can see which case they're actually related to in this case matter column. So again, you can add those records, notes, activities, documents directly to a case, and then they would show up on the other bundles, or you can add it to the bundle itself. And again, it shows on all of the cases. So optional, but again, a good way to be able to group together your cases and be able to easily keep track of all of the things going on for each of those cases as you're viewing each separate one. All right, that should be everything for our housing specific resources that I wanted to share with you today. So thank you for watching and have a good rest of your day.